Welcome to the What Now podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Powers. Follow along as I figure out how to go from feeling lost and at a crossroads in my life to hopefully, eventually, being found. If you have ever felt like you needed a change or pivoting from your current experience is necessary, but you just don't know how, join me. Wanderers are always welcome. All right, everyone, welcome back to What Now, a podcast for Lost and Found. This is your host, Amanda, and I am so excited. Today's guest is the incredibly impactful Jesse Katches. He is a digital content creator and mental health advocate who uses humor and an approachable self-development tools to help us talk about our feelings, better understand anxiety, and learn how to share our own stories in meaningful ways. So everybody, please join me in welcoming Jesse to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
This is so exciting. I feel honored to have you here. This is really cool. Surprisingly, I had come across your content before, but I didn't put two and two together until Justin had approached me and was like, "Hey, you know what? Somebody you should really talk to is Jesse. I think he'd be perfect for the show." And I was super glad that you were available. So this has worked out so well. So welcome. For my listeners who may not know you or have not had a chance to review some of your content, could you kind of give us a quick background about who you are and the work that you're doing in the mental health and self-development spaces?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started creating content after moving to New York. Before moving to New York, I was working a job that left me fairly unfulfilled and and very unhappy. I was experiencing a lot of anxiety at the time and kind of felt directionless and had no clarity in where I was going. And at that time, I met a girl who is my fiance, if you can see
Yes.
her in the
Hi.
background.
Yeah.
And at the time, she was unhappy with her job as well. So we decided to quit our jobs and move across the country from California to New York. And at that time, I was so scared to make that leap because for me, I was leaving a situation that I was unhappy in, but very comfortable, very content, and felt secure. And I had all my health insurance and my doctor's visits through that job. So I was very afraid to leave that job, and so it felt like a lot of anxiety to make that leap. But then I realized something pretty funny when I quit my job and moved across the country and started pursuing something I actually loved and enjoyed. My anxiety started to subside. And I realized for the first time that this whole time I'd been running from the fear, from the anxiety. And now when I was facing it head on, leaning into it, I was finally starting to feel good again and feel like myself. I started making content, pursuing something I love, like I said, making videos when I got here to New York. And they didn't work right away. It took a lot of trial and error, a lot of failures to get to where I am. But I realized that when I started talking about my story, my experience with anxiety and leaning into the anxiety rather than running away from it, that's when I started to connect with people online and people started to resonate with my work. And so then I realized I can create content that shares my experience with anxiety and mental health and create it for a younger version of myself who felt like he was alone, felt like he didn't have the tools or the resources or anybody to talk to about it. And so that's what I do now. I create content from the space of what would my younger self have benefited from, and that's what I make content about now.
I love that. And I think that's a good way to keep yourself authentic and genuine too, because you already have in your mind a very specific person you're trying to reach. Even though that person's, they're gone now in that sense, because you're no longer that younger version of yourself, but like you have a very specific person you want to talk to and a target audience that could exist through that and resonate with. And I think that I'm sure it's great to help you stay focused and find purpose again. So that's so good.
Yeah.
So you didn't always make content, right? So you're a recent creator in that sense. What were you doing before you transitioned to video and editing and things like that?
Yeah. I was recent full-time content creator. I've been making videos my entire life. I have VHS tapes full of little short films that me and my brothers and friends used to make. We'd get done with school, pick up the camcorder, run outside, and just recreate movies all day. That was my childhood growing up. So I've always loved filmmaking. I've always loved storytelling, and it was just something that I got away from for so long because it was so fun and it was such like a childhood hobby that I thought there was no way I could make a living doing this. And so I went down a different path. I got a degree in kinesiology, actually, and I was a personal trainer for a while. Worked at Equinox, worked at a few other gyms, and yeah, I found myself desiring more creativity and desiring more of that storytelling that I was so in love with as a child. So I was kind of a journeyman for a while, jumping around to different jobs, and I landed at a website development company selling websites. I was a website salesman, looking at spreadsheets all day, making cold calls all day, and that was the job that I referenced
Mhm.
was very soul draining and unfulfilling at the time. And yeah, so that's the one right before moving to New York. I quit that job at the website company and came across to New York with no job, and then I started working on fashion sets as a production assistant, and then started working my way up to actually shoot the videos.
That's great. I'm glad that you shared that because I know a few of my listeners, they're a little split. So some of them have rotated between multiple jobs several times and they're still trying to find their purpose or figure out what it is that maybe they're good at something, but they just don't want to fully dive into it for whatever reason that they maybe stopped. Or there's somebody that's done the same industry for the whole time and they're like, I'm kind of over this. How do I pivot? What do I do? It's so scary to leave when you are secure, kind of like what you said. You had the benefits, you had the health insurance, and if you went out on your own, that goes away. And if you can't get access to your doctors, how do you handle or get your medication for your anxiety or anything? Like so I can imagine that that must have been really scary for you and your partner to move all the way across the country like that.
Yeah, it was really scary, but at the same time, for the first time, it felt like for the first time in years, it felt like I was doing something for myself. It was something to make me feel alive again in a way. I'd just been so content and so stagnant in my growth for so many years leading up to that. So as scary as it was to quit that, leave it all behind and make this leap that was so uncertain and so unpredictable. For the first time, it was like in years, I was like, I'm alive again. I feel excited about something. I'm really into this. And so the fear was there for sure. But more than anything, it was just excitement and kind of a pulse, a heartbeat again.
Good. I'm so glad that you felt that way because I have felt similar things. Maybe not necessarily the pulse, but like a strong pull. Like if there's an idea in my head that I've wanted to do, like for podcasting, before I ever started this show, I had thought of multiple concepts and wrote up business plans and like had kind of thought about like if I was ever going to go out on my own, these are the things that I think would be good, or at least I'd love to try. And in my previous career, you could never do that because you couldn't really have like a public facing persona. So I just always kept telling myself, well, I'm not allowed to do it. So I just might as well not even consider it. Like it's not a reality choice if I want to progress in this particular path I'm already on. So I can't even entertain. And then when I finally did transition out, it's kind of like, all right, I have so many opportunities now because I can do what I want and I can give this a shot. And if it flops, okay, at least I did it. At least I can say that I have done more than most people. Actually going after a dream, even if it didn't work out, I could at least feel accomplished in the fact that I gave it a shot. So I think that that's great that you had the recognition in that moment, even if it wasn't a fully concrete thought yet. You're just like, I already feel immensely better. This is such a good decision. Like listening to your body and what it tells you, that's so important.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said it, I mean, the willingness to fail, the willingness to just
Mm-hmm.
lean into something and be in the headspace of I'm terrified, I'm really scared, I don't know how this is going to work out, but I'm willing to do it and put myself out there at the risk of completely bombing, completely failing, and who knows what happens from there, who knows how other people view me, whatever. But being in that headspace of being willing to do that, it allows us to knock down a lot of doors that we previously thought were probably closed or didn't even exist. And I've recognized that for in my own life for both the move across the country, but also just in everyday life. I mean, I've made a recent video series about public speaking. It's something that I've
Mhm.
run from for the past 20 years. Even though I talk to a camera for a living, it's not often I'm up in front of a live audience or anything like that.
Sure.
And so it's a fear that I've run from for so long. And I recently got asked to be on the Tamron Hall show for just a short little segment, and I almost said no. The email came into my inbox, and I saw it, and I was like, that's definitely not going to happen. I don't even think I'm going to respond to it. But the problem is that email address goes to both me and my manager. So he responded, and he's like, hey, we should talk about this. I was just going
We
to
should do it.
kind of let it pass, right? And so I talked to my manager, I talked to my fiance, and they're both like, you got to do it. And my headspace there, it went from there's no way I can do this to then, okay, if my team is willing to see me just crash and burn and fail on live TV, if the Tamron Hall show is willing to have me just not even be able to get a word out in front of their audience, then I guess that's okay. Because at the end of the day, if I do it and get through it, if I do it and even fail, but get through to the other side, it's growth either way. Like
For
there's
sure.
nothing bad that can come from this. Even if I fail on live TV, on national TV, it's like, so what? I'm going to wake up tomorrow and be back at it. Like
Yeah.
another chance. There's no downside to putting yourself out there and being willing to fail. And I think it's such an avoided headspace, an avoided feeling. It feels so bad, right? But I think when we can lean into that, like you're saying, it's probably where most of the magic in life happens, I'd say.
Do you think it took you a while to get to this point for any particular reason? Like, was video and content creation or entrepreneurship in that sense in the media realm, like, was that supported when you were growing up, or were you in the mindset kind of like me, like I've got to get a job that's going to pay me. I have to get a job that's going to support, the societal lifestyle expectations that I'm supposed to have. And like, if I were to pursue this pattern, I couldn't do that. And so I'm just, was your initial dream cultivated at home, or did you not have that kind of support? And like, maybe that's what took you a little bit longer to even decide that you should have been pursuing your passion the whole time.
My parents were the most supportive parents I could have asked for. I could have said I wanted to be a shoe shiner my whole life, and they would have been like, if you love it, do it.
Okay.
There it's like they anything I came up with, I was cultivated to dream. They taught me to dream and like really go after things. But at the same time, they didn't put a focus on money. So in my head, it was like I could just do anything and the money will come. Like I didn't even think about it. But we weren't like well off. We didn't, it wasn't like we weren't struggling, but we weren't really, really excelling in my family. We were kind of just middle of the road, middle class. And so money was like, for me growing up, it wasn't a priority. It was more so I'm going to do what I love and I'm going to go after big things. And my parents really supported that. But I think the problem for me was when I started to go through the traditional system, and then, these big dreams weren't so much preached and supported from the traditional schooling system and
Mhm.
life system. So the reason I didn't pursue filmmaking, to be completely honest, in college was because I was trying to date a girl at the time, and her dad uh her dad right out from the start asked me how I was going to support his daughter if
Yeah.
we get married. I was like 16, 17 at the time. And he's like, he sat me down. He's like, how are you going to support my daughter? And I was like, well, I really love filmmaking. I want to, make movies for a living. I be a director, editor, whatever it is. And then he came back with this whole, this whole packet of papers like this thick, showing me that like to all this evidence that to start in filmmaking, to like become a filmmaker, most
Oh my
editors,
god.
most filmmakers start in making porn. And I'm like, what?
What?
Like, so
No
yeah,
way. That's such extreme. Yeah.
there's no way this is like factual by any means. But at
You're
the
like,
time I was
"Okay,
very
great."
impressionable, very young, and I believed it. And I was like, oh damn, I guess I gotta
I'm
find another path.
wow.
So
What
yeah,
a
that veered me away from it. I was like, I guess I can't be a filmmaker. I guess I got to go to school for something else. And kinesiology for me was the next best thing because I fitness has always been a big aspect of my life. So
right.
yeah, so I was cultivated to dream by my family, but then it was kind of cut off just through life.
Yeah, that life has a funny way of tearing you down or turning you into whatever it wants you to be at that given time. And that's rough. Oh man, I actually in my previous career, I worked in law enforcement and I had to work human trafficking and crimes against children cases. So the fact that that man used it as an anti-trafficking campaign to be like, "Don't you dare go into film. My daughter will not be a star for you," and be like, "Okay, good on that dad, I guess, for looking out for you for his daughter," but
Yeah, right.
in a very twisted way to explain to somebody like, okay, how about you get an internship, see if it works. If you don't like it,
Right.
pick something else. Yeah, but I am not surprised at all that that conversation happened. I've had so many friends tell me about what their husbands had to deal with before from their fathers, and I'm just like, well, they'll be lucky if they make it off the front porch with my dad. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah,
Right.
oh my goodness. Yeah, no, that would scare me into not doing that too. And so I get it that maybe you took a little bit longer to get to that. But how were things going when you first started to see like your symptoms started to get worse and your anxiety and your panic attacks? Like, did you have much of a support system around you for that, or did you kind of have to really discover what was going on your own and then kind of build your habits to build yourself back up? How did that process go? Did you have a support system, or have you just built it now through your digital community?
Well, I've experienced anxiety for almost as long as I can remember. At least bits and pieces of it, not as severe. It goes through, peaks and valleys for sure. But the times that I have felt it the most, and I'm talking about prior to today to where I
Sure.
am leading up to this point, the moments in my life, the periods of my life that I felt it the most were college and after college during that stint at the web development company. And in those two periods, I felt completely alone. I'm not that I didn't have friends or family that I could have opened up to. It was just the things that I was feeling and experiencing. I had no idea that other people were feeling or experiencing the same things. And because of that, I was afraid that I may be losing my mind. I honestly
Mm.
thought I was going crazy. I thought maybe I'd contracted some strange, rare disease that nobody had ever heard of before. And they were just, I was going to be the first case. And they just I was waiting to get this
Oh
wild
no.
diagnosis.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of wild. And so because I felt that way, because I didn't know other people were having the same kind of intrusive thoughts as me or the same physical anxiety symptoms as me, um I was too afraid to open up and really tell anyone too close to me just because I was afraid of what they might think. And so at that time, and this was a time when there was no TikTok, there was no Instagram,
Right.
there may have been Instagram at that time, but it was like photo strictly photo app with filters, like the
Yeah, the
no
OG.
filter only, or
Uh-huh.
no filter was like the main hashtag on there. Um, but yeah, so at that time, I there was not much online about like other people experiencing the same things, and if there were, it was like deep in forums that I hadn't found yet. So I really didn't feel like I had anybody to speak to about it. But no fault to them. It was me being too afraid to speak out. And so now, kind of going back to what I mentioned in the beginning about creating videos for my younger self, when got to this point, when I started making videos, when I started speaking up and being more open about it, I realized that my younger self would have felt a world of support, a world like 10,000 times better if he had just seen one of my videos talking about some of the symptoms and things that I've experienced. Because even seeing that would have showed him that he's not alone and shown him that other people are going through this too. And to that point, it was actually a book I was reading at the height of my anxiety. I was trying to really search for anything I could to feel
Yeah.
better, to find solutions to this anxiety situation I was in. and I came across this book, Dare by Barry McDonough. And in that book, I remember it was after one of the worst panic attacks of my life, the worst panic attack of my life. And I had called 911, and they had told me I was fine. It was just a panic attack. So after that, I was like, I need to find something to feel better. I can't continue going down this path. And I found that book, and I remember listening to it on Audible as I was doing dishes in my apartment. And he started talking about the same exact things, the same experience I was feeling in every way that I thought I was going crazy with. And I thought I was all alone. And he was mentioning it like he was in my head. And I started bawling my eyes out because I was like, finally, somebody. There's other people out there who feel what I'm feeling, who have
Yeah.
the same experience as me. And if they've been through it and now are talking about it, then they're through to the other side, and there's hope that I can get through it too. So I think even just hearing something, even hearing somebody's going through the same thing as you, even, somebody sharing their experience is so powerful. And so that's a big part of the reason why now I make the videos that I do.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're on the other side yet, or do you kind of still feel in the throw of things, in the thick of it, or maybe somewhere in between?
I think it's always a bit of a sliding scale. There's definitely moments where I feel much more anxious or consumed by the things I'm feeling or my thoughts than other days. Compared to where I was, I'm definitely through the other side of that. But yeah, I think anxiety is funny because it's like it's not something that will ever go away. It's not like, and that's not the point. Like, you don't want to get rid of anxiety. Anxiety's a mechanism in our body to keep us alive. It's a safety mechanism, and it's meant to prepare you to move and survive in threatening situations. So to get rid of it entirely, I mean, you have an advantage if you're anxious. It doesn't feel good, but it's like you kind of have an advantage because you're always ready to move. You're always ready for action. You're like, you're quicker, your responses are faster and whatnot. So, I'm half joking about this. Anxiety, I don't think ever really goes away. I think
Mhm.
the real growth happens not when you get the anxious feelings to stop, but when you learn to feel them and move forward anyways, and use them to your advantage, and learn to live and thrive even feeling anxiety. Because if you're not afraid of the feelings, if you're not afraid of those sensations, then they're just feelings and sensations that can pass. It's really when we start to obsess over them and try to stop them and try not to feel them, that's when they come on even stronger. And so I don't think the sensations, I don't think ever really go away. The thoughts, the sensations, not fully, but it's expanding your capacity to deal with them. And I think that is always kind of a sliding scale, to answer your question.
I'm glad you brought up fear and how to take the time to be self aware enough to face whatever it is you're actually feeling. Because a lot of your content is kind of catered to acknowledging that, fear exists, anxiety is part of being a human, it happens to all of us, like, on a sliding scale in that sense. But the best way to kind of look at it, at least from my perspective, looking at what you've produced so far, learning how to lean into that and not run away is kind of the best thing you can do to just start slowly building up your tolerance, or I guess your best way to um, handle those things. And so I'm curious, what have been some of the best tips or tactics that you have used personally that have worked for you? And then I'm also curious, on the other side of the coin, what could an outsider do if their loved one is struggling with anxiety? Like, if I don't happen to have it, but my partner does, what's something I could do to support them while they're dealing with that, either during or after the feeling of anxiety or the panic attack?
Yeah, great question. One of the biggest takeaways from that book, Dare, was and it's still, that was kind of the foundation of when I started to feel better, was the principles from that book. And it wasn't principles that he made up in the book. He even admits in the book, he's like, this is nothing new. It's just, this is kind of the sequence of using them that helped me the most. And there's been a lot of people. It's Viktor Frankl, author, who wrote a tremendous book, Man's Search for Meaning.
Mhm.
Um, he talks about it in his book, Paradoxical Intention. I don't know if he talks about it in that book actually, but anyways, it's the idea of paradoxical intention. And it's basically asking for more of the feeling that you're trying to avoid. At the end of the day, with anxiety, in most things and all things in life, what we resist persists. So if we're trying to resist the anxious feelings, if we're trying to push them away and fight them, then they're only going to get stronger and stronger. At the core of anxiety, as I mentioned, it's it's a mechanism to keep us alive, and it activates when we feel threatened. So if we feel these sensations in our body and we say, or either verbally, mentally, whatever, if we act like these sensations are an actual threat, our body it's only going to fuel the response because it responds when we feel threatened. So if we feel a sensation and we think that it's a threat, anxiety is only going to activate more because it feels threatened. I found the best way to deal with my anxiety is to fully just lean into it.
Yeah.
The more I've tried to run from the anxious sensations, the more I try to, stop the anxious thoughts, the stronger they come on. And that's anxiety by nature. The more you fight it, the stronger it comes on because it's trying to protect you from threats. So if you view it as a threat, it's only going to activate more. But when you feel anxiety, when you feel the symptoms, the sensations, you have the thoughts, and then you say, "Huh, okay, that's fine. I accept what I'm feeling." It's okay to feel these anxious feelings. It's okay to have these anxious thoughts, and you don't view them as a threat, but you just accept what you're feeling and you lean into them, then it takes away the power, it takes away the threat, and so anxiety has no need to activate in your body if you're not threatened. So the more you can diffuse the thoughts and accept what you're feeling, which again, going back to Dare, that's the whole concept of the book is diffuse the anxiety, accept what you're feeling, run towards it, and then engage in your life again. And I've taken those principles with me and used them in my own life, and it's been the absolute best way to deal with anxiety and live with it and use it to your advantage. And I think, it's interesting. I've been asked this question about about how other people can, partners with anxiety who or other people who have know somebody who's experiencing anxiety can help in an anxious situation. And the context is different. I mean, if it's a panic attack, you might want to do one thing. If
Sure.
it's general anxiety, you might want to do another. But I think overall, I think what I've found in my own life that makes me feel the most supported is going back to kind of when I was listening to that book in my kitchen and I broke down. It's just acknowledging what they are feeling, because a lot of times it's like anxiety kind of feels made up in your head sometimes from the outside, from other people's perspective. It's like, what are you afraid of? There's literally nothing going on, right? But inside there's this like internal war. It's like a battleground inside your body, and it feels like it doesn't let up and it doesn't stop. And it's really, really hard to explain that and to express that when it's happening inside you, and you really don't know how to ask for support. And I think for me, the biggest impact was just hearing that somebody else was going through the same thing and that I had support. So I think just letting somebody know, like sitting down, having a conversation and being like, hey, I'm here for you, whatever you need. I know you're going through a lot, but I'm here for you. And again, also, when I was at the peak of my anxiety, I was going from doctor appointment to doctor appointment because again, I was afraid I didn't think there was any way the things that were happening inside my body were just from anxiety alone. And so I was going from doctor to doctor to doctor, and every single time they'd run a test on me, and they'd be like, "It's just your anxiety.
Mhm.
You'll feel better. Like, calm down, take anxiety pills, whatever." Like over and over and over again, it was like, "It's just your anxiety. It's just your anxiety." And it made me feel so invalidated and so afraid because I was like, in my mind, I was like, I'm dying and nobody cares, or I'm losing my mind and nobody cares. Like, nobody's helping me get to the bottom of this. But then finally, I had an appointment with another doctor, another specialist, And finally, he sat me down and he's like, I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what you're experiencing, but whatever it is, we're going to get to the bottom of this. I'm going to help you get to the bottom of this. I'm here for you. And I remember tearing up in the doctor's office because I was like, that's all I needed to hear. I just needed to know that somebody was with me and somebody was willing to go through this with me and not make me feel crazy.
Right.
And I think as a partner, if you know somebody who's experiencing anxiety, just letting them know that you are there for them no matter what, and that you sympathize, you empathize with what they're going through. And I think that does so much. Even though it seems so simple, it goes so far.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought that up, that it could be even it can your partner may already feel helpless because they're dealing with something that they feel like they can't control, because it can come on at any time with any kind of trigger, and until you kind of learn your triggers, maybe you don't know what's going to happen. So you're always living in a state of suspense, like when is the next one coming? And if you're the outsider and you're trying to understand what that's like it can just be really difficult. But luckily, if it truly is as simple as saying like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm here for you and I am happy to support you in whatever way I can, like that's great. You can start with that one step, making sure that you're communicating well and at least leaving an open space or a safe space for them to say what they need to say. I do remember when I was in my 20s, I had a roommate when I was living in DC, and she does deal with anxiety. And I, being younger, didn't really know how to handle it or didn't really know what to say to her or how to help. And it broke my heart so many times when she would be going out with partners or trying to date, and they would kind of let the relationship go because she would have the anxiety and she didn't have the words to put to it yet, right? Because she knew she felt anxious, but maybe didn't always know why and didn't know how to explain it. And things would end or it would get ruined, and or they'd leave, or they'd be like, well, I'm done with this, I'm not dealing with this anymore, kind of a thing. And she wouldn't really know how to react. And I always felt so awful for her, just because obviously she deserved to be happy and she deserved to have her feelings heard. But to be told over and over again that you're just, whatever you're saying isn't valid, or like, I don't understand it, so it must not be real, like, has to suck. It's got to be terrible to feel that way, or be gaslit before gaslighting was the hot topic word, and that's
Right.
never a way you should be living your life day to day like that. So I'm so glad that you found a partner that at least has supported you in helpful ways, or at least had an effective way of being like, all right, whatever you're dealing with, I'm here for it and we'll figure it out together. That's crucial and unfortunately rare.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did
Yeah.
you
I
guys
think
meet
so.
originally through the anxiety, or you met in a different way?
No, not at all. Yeah. It was entirely different, entirely different way. Kind of half on um Tinder back in the day when
Ah,
Tinder
yeah.
was like just a new thing. We've been together for like 8 years or so, and we matched on the app, and then we talked for like a day. Then she stopped responding to my messages, and and then like 3 months later, we happened to cross paths in person, and she recognized me, and she's
Oh,
like, hey, you're that guy. And I was like, hey, yeah, you stopped responding to my
yeah, you ghosted
messages.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And it turned out we lived very close to each other, and we went on a date, and the rest was
Oh, well,
history.
that's awesome. Oh, yeah, that's funny, right, running into your ghost on the street. But
Yeah,
no, that's
right.
good. I'm love that that was a serendipitous meet cute. Then still, technically, I think. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
well, you did mention a little bit earlier in our conversation that you had been feeling stuck in your previous careers before you started the full time content creation, and so I'm curious if maybe we could talk a little bit more about your tips for when you're stuck. You posted a video on your YouTube where you talked about let me look at my notes here, the 3D flow and how to take back control of your life when you're feeling stuck. So I was just curious if you could talk a little bit about what is the 3D flow? What are the 3Ds, and how can people best implement that particular strategy of yours into their life?
Yeah. 3D flow. I love this concept. It's a little mental model. I've been very indecisive in my life, and and I recognize that the times that I've made the most progress and been the most satisfied with with the direction and trajectory of my life has been because I decided on something and then lived as if it was already a reality. And I realized that I never really knew the real definition of making a decision before that, before realizing the 3D flow. And the 3D flow, just to kind of give an overview, it's three decisions, the three decision flow. And it's called the flow because they flow down from top to bottom. And the first decision is deciding on your outcome. The second decision is deciding on a strategy. And then the third decision is deciding on your actions. And so the 3D flow, I recognized that I've made decisions in the past, but I've decided on things that I wanted, not things that I'll have. So a good example of this is, you go to a restaurant, there's thousands of things in different restaurants that of items on the menu that you want. In any given restaurant, there's like 10 different items on the menu that you probably want, but you're not going to get food. You're not going to get delivered food from the waiter until you decide what you're going to have. And so if I go to a restaurant and I decide I'm going to have the spaghetti, then I live as if the spaghetti, like in that moment, the spaghetti is now mine. It's a reality that the spaghetti is going to be delivered to me, right? I made a decision that that's what I'm going to have. I don't order the spaghetti and then I'm like, man, I wonder if the waiter's going to bring me the meatball sub instead, or I wonder if he's going to bring me a salad instead. It's like
Yeah.
you don't make a decision and then expect something else. And so I realized that like my whole life I had kind of decided on things that I wanted and not things that I'm going to have and make it a reality. And the root of the word decision means to cut off. So you cut off all other options. That is your new reality when you decide on something. And so a good example of the 3D flow at work was last year I ran the New York Marathon. And at first I decided that I was going to run the marathon. I made the decision. I'm like, there's no way that I'm not running this marathon. So I decided on the big outcome. I decided on a specific time that I was going to run it, but that was a big outcome, run the New York Marathon. And so at that moment, that was the new reality. I was a person who was going to be in the marathon. I wasn't wondering if maybe I'd get in or anything like that. That was it. And then the second D was deciding on a strategy. For me, that's deciding on the training plan. So I decided, I picked a training plan. I stuck with it. It had me set up for 16 weeks for the plan. And then the third D, the deciding on the actions, was the daily workouts, the daily exercises within the training plan. So the beautiful thing about the 3D flow is when you have D1 set, the outcome, and D2 set, the strategy, D3 becomes almost automatic. So for me, I had every day in my plan, every week, I had a long run on Saturday. And so every week I knew it was nice because I knew that Saturday run was coming and the action became automatic. It wasn't like I got there and I was like, maybe I'm going to run, maybe not. Do I actually need to run? No, it was like
Yeah.
D1 was set, D2 was set. So D3, it was just automatic. I knew I was going to go on that run. And the actions are very flexible. You can kind of change them. The plan, the strategy, D2, I think it should only change once you try it and fail or you find a better way, but it's kind of more set in stone. And then the outcome, D1 is like, this is not changing unless drastic life circumstances change. But that's kind of the D3 3D flow.
Congratulations to running the marathon. I am not a runner. I did do soccer growing up, but I don't think I don't have the stamina. I feel like it takes a very specific person that wants to run that far. It's
I
just
think you could do
because
it.
yeah,
Yeah, you
no,
could definitely
it's
do it.
impressive. Yeah,
I
no,
appreciate
that's
it,
very
but
cool. Is that
thank
was
you.
the only marathon you've done, or have you done more since then?
So far, that's the only one I've done,
Yeah,
but
would you
I'm
yeah, you wanna do
planning
it
on
again?
doing more. Yeah, as
Okay.
soon as I finished the marathon, I was like, right when I crossed the finish line, I was like, never again. I'm never doing that again.
You're like,
And then
"Oh
the
god."
next morning, I woke up and I started looking for more marathons immediately.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, you tricked yourself into your new hobby now. Like, I'm sure you've been a runner for quite a while since you mentioned you've been interested and used to be a trainer, and fitness is clearly probably part of your routine these days. But marathons, yeah, that's it takes a special kind of dedication to do that. So I wish you the best of luck in the next one too. Hopefully, you can get a new PR on your time and stuff.
Yeah,
I'm
thank you.
Yeah, I'm also curious. Every now and then, in some of your content, you've also brought up like imposter syndrome, or you pretending to be anxiety man, and so like anxiety comes in and makes you feel like you're not worthy of whatever's happening in that particular clip. And so I was curious if you talk about this much with other people that follow you, but I know imposter syndrome kind of affects us all at some point in our lives. So what do you say to people when they mention that they're feeling behind in life, or like this really, this is not where I'm supposed to be. I can't believe that like people are trusting me to do this or think this. Like, I don't know if I deserve this kind of a deal. Like, how do you help them stop having that imposter syndrome thought or the comparison game too? Like, I'm not where I should be right now.
The comparison game is a dangerous place to live. I do it to this day. It's really hard not to. I have to limit my time on social media scrolling. And if I am scrolling, I have to be very intentional about what I'm scrolling for. If I'm just on there scrolling just for entertainment, then I find very quickly that I can't help but compare myself to other people, especially maybe it's different for other people who aren't actively creating content on there, but for me it's I'm always comparing my videos to somebody else's,
Sure.
and mine always seem worse. Like no matter how good of a video
Mm.
I make, they always seem worse than everybody else's. I think being intentional with your time on social media is a big help, because that's like it's just right there in your face. It's
Mhm.
you can't really avoid comparing yourself to others if you're on social media a lot. But in terms of being an imposter, there's kind of two answers here. But in terms of imposter syndrome, I think there's one question that I've been thinking a lot about that I think it really just squashes the idea of imposter syndrome right off the bat. And the question is to ask yourself is, what kind of problems am I having in your life? What kind of problems am I having regarding your job, regarding the area you feel like an imposter? Because, if I call myself a content creator and I never make a video, I never write a script, I never do any of the things that it takes to be a content creator,
Mhm.
then my problem is just getting started. My problem is actually getting started. And in that case, it's kind of fair to call myself an imposter if I'm calling myself a content creator, but I've never started.
Okay.
So, so I think that in that context, that's fair. But if my problems are, I'm trying to make better videos. I've posted a video. I'm trying to make better videos. I'm trying to get more views. I'm trying to grow and expand my reach and add more value. Then the problems I'm facing are with the process. It's more of a process problem than a procrastination, like getting started problem. So if the problems you're facing have to do with the process of the thing that you feel an imposter in, then there's no way you can convince me you're an imposter, because you're doing the thing that it takes to be the thing that you feel you're not. So
Mhm.
it's just like if you feel like an imposter writing, but you're writing every single day, you're publishing, you're not publishing, you're even writing emails to people just to practice whatever it is, you're a writer. There's no denying that, because the problems you're facing have to do with the craft that you're doing. So I think when you ask yourself that, it's kind of squashes the idea of an imposter syndrome, because imposter syndrome I think is just self-doubt at the end of the day. It's like doubting your abilities, doubting your what you're capable of, doubting you are where you should be or as far along as you need to be. And that's just a story that is all made up in our head. We
Yeah.
create our own story. Our stories either limit us or they make us thrive, and we can change our story in a moment about anything. And our story of self-doubt, it's unfortunate, it limits, it stops a lot of people from getting started, but it's honestly just a story. And another way to kind of squash it is is just asking yourself, what's the story that I'm telling myself right now about this context, in the context of this situation? And, you know, what evidence do I have to support that? Or, what does the evidence actually point to? I think a lot of the times we feel like an imposter and we feel self-doubt when we create a story in our head that's not based on the evidence of our life.
I'm really glad that I asked you that because I'm always curious what everybody's perspectives are when they come on the show about that, because we all have different opinions on when to consider yourself an imposter. And I love that you twisted it on its head. It's like, well, are you doing the thing? And if you are, then you're not an imposter because you're actually participating. Whether or not you're good at it yet, that's different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that comes with time, and that's how you build confidence, and it just takes time to get better at your craft. And I know for me that right now in this moment, since I just started doing the podcasting type stuff back in October, so I feel very behind the curve when I'm looking at other content creators or other podcasts that are well off, and I just have to remind myself that, well, they started in 2018 or 2019, so they're 6-ish years ahead of you. So they've had the time to build their name, their face, their brand, their community. That makes sense that they are successful today. You have to take the time to do those same things, or figure out your niche or your slice of the pie wherever that fits. And if you don't know that yet, it's, or you don't know where that is yet, it's fine. You'll figure it out. You'll find it. You've been stuck before and gotten unstuck. You can get unstuck again. And I appreciate you reminding us all that you twist the question. Are you doing it yet or not? And if you are, you're good to go. You'll figure it out. Especially if you're
Right.
willing to ask for help. That's a big lesson I've learned
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. I think, and also there's so much, like, in that context, it's really, really hard to be an imposter because, like, even having the idea of, like, I want to start a podcast and then starting to do research, like, that's
Mm-hmm.
part of the process. So you could even say you're not an imposter then if you haven't even started, but you started doing research. Like,
Yeah.
it's so flexible, as there's so much leeway. And I think we just need to be kinder with ourselves,
So much.
like,
The
so
negative
so
thoughts.
much of
Yeah.
our problems would be solved if we are just our own best friends, our own biggest support.
One of my solo episodes, I did talk about, like, I had kind of done an experiment on myself where I wrote down all the things that I was saying internally. And then at the end of the day, I was supposed to go back and reread what I had written. And I couldn't even get to the end of the day because I was writing down things that were awful, absolutely
Mm,
awful, totally untrue. I'm sure with, professional help, I could figure out where they came from originally, but like, I had to admit to everyone on the episode, or at least to whoever was listening to that particular episode, was just like, I didn't even finish because it was so bad. And the truth was, I realized I have more work to do, that I can't talk to myself this way if I want to succeed, or I want to try this new thing, or I want to grow in this particular direction. I have to still figure out how to speak kindly to myself, because what you say to your body your body responds to or begins to believe. And I don't want to set myself up for failure unintentionally already before I even, get off to the races. So I think that's really great. And in particular for other content creators, if somebody wanted to consider this as an actual career, are there any advice or tips that you would want to give someone that would like to do content creation full time? Or are there any lessons in particular that you wished you had learned before you got started?
I think knowing that you have value to give, knowing that you can offer people value information and create valuable videos is a big part of it. I think a lot of people a lot of people go into this trying to just get a viral video, or trying to just, like, build a following and make whatever video is trending or whatever audio is trending. And that's kind of the idea beforehand for a lot of people that I've spoken to. And I think knowing, one, that you have value to give, but then two, actually trying to create and give that value in your videos. I know for me in particular, when I started, I was trying to become more of an influencer than I was trying to add value and build a business. And I think when you approach it that way, you're, like I said, you're always going to be chasing the follower count, the views, the numbers, and the next hot thing, and how to get ahead. And in that case, you're really, really going to be playing the comparison game, because then it's like, when is enough enough? It never
Sure.
really is. And so I think if I would have tried to add value from the beginning rather than trying to build a following from the beginning, I would have just that subtle shift, add value versus build a following, because the following will come once you add the value. It's a subtle shift, but I think it would have helped me a lot in the beginning. And additionally, lean into your story, connect with people through what you know, through what you've been through your experience. I think some of the most valuable content is content that we live, we experience something, we learn about the topic, and then we teach it through social media. And I think the more you do that, the more you lean into who you are, your own experiences, the faster you'll find your own voice and your own style and who you are. Social media can be a beautiful self-discovery process, because then it's like you're digging through your life, you're seeing what lessons you've learned, what experiences you've had, and then you pull from those and you create videos and content pieces around that with the intention of adding value to other people. And through that, you learn about yourself and you learn about the topic, and it becomes this beautiful cycle of living life, learning and teaching, and helping other people in the process. So I think the more you can lean into your story, pull from your own experience, be authentic, be real, be vulnerable, and open up and share and connect with people, the more value you're going to bring. And through that, the fruit of that will build you an audience.
I love that. I think that's really great advice, and staying true to who you are at the end of the day, every day will whatever is important. My dad used to tell us like you should do what you love and the money will follow. Like, and I didn't really understand that growing up, like because you want to go out with your friends, you want to have the cash, you want to spend it, you want to just focus on having fun all the time. But like the truth is, if you do what you love, people will recognize it, and the people that are genuinely appreciative of that will stay and support you and help you continue to spread that positivity. And money's not everything, right? So figuring out how to just share your story in an authentic way, I think is phenomenal and worth the effort if somebody truly wants to do content full time. So I really appreciate that. And I know you have a deadline and a busy day, so I only have just one final question for you. If you were to give advice to anybody who is struggling or feeling lost in their life, or in a major transition period, trying to find their purpose again, but they just don't really know how or what way to turn, what advice would you give that person who's feeling lost?
Start experimenting, start trying things. I remember when I decided that I was going to start creating videos, I I made travel videos, I made a food review channel, I made videos on cryptocurrency, I did camera reviews, I did film reviews, I did vlogs, and then I started making mental health video. That's like 7 or 8 different topics.
Yeah, you tried a lot.
I tried a lot, and I never would have gotten to the topic that I speak about today unless I went through all 7 of those different topics. And so I think at the end of the day, it's like if I just thought about it, if I was like trying to just decide on a topic and get the perfect one to start, I never would have started. But because I was willing to fail so many times until I got to the one that I wanted to speak about, that's kind of it pulled the passion out of me. I didn't know I wanted to talk about this. I didn't know I wanted to make videos on this topic, but it took failing 7, 8 different other categories, other niches to get to where I am today.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can be just frozen in our thoughts and we have to think we have to get it perfect right away, but we really don't. I think failing as fast as you can and trying different things and failing is the fastest way to figure out what you really love, what you're really passionate about, and get unstuck. So if I would say follow your curiosities and don't do anything perfect. Give yourself permission to do everything imperfect. I think I forget where I heard this. I'm going to butcher the quote, but it was like somebody told a student, a teacher told a student in a certain context. Wow, I really forgot the quote, but it's basically
Okay.
telling them to embrace mediocrity. And it sounds so backwards because we all want to excel. We all want to do this beautiful work and be perfect,
Mhm.
but be willing to be mediocre and just try things, because if you don't allow yourself to be imperfect, if you don't allow yourself to be mediocre, then you're just going to sit on the sidelines with too much pressure to even begin anything. So embrace imperfection and try a lot of things and follow your curiosity.
That's again another way that I've never really thought about it before. That mediocrity still teaches you something. Like just because it didn't work in this lane doesn't mean it can't work somewhere else, or you won't be good at something else. You just got to keep trying. So I love that. Thank you.
Yeah,
Jesse,
of
you have been
course.
amazing, and I am so grateful for you coming on the show. And I really do appreciate your time and taking out of your day to spend some time with us. What is the best way for people to connect with you or find you, or if they want to work with you or review your content, how should they do that?
Yeah, it's my name on all platforms: Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. It's just Jesse Katches. Connect with me on there. Send me a DM. I try to respond to all DMs, but if not, my email address is on there as well on each of those platforms, and you can send me an email through there, and it will definitely be seen.
Okay, wonderful. And you can also sign up for his newsletter as well if you want to follow along with his journey and his path with helping people with their anxiety. So that's been wonderful. All right, everybody, that is the end of our episode for today. All of our contact information will be in the show notes. Like, subscribe, leave a review. You know the drill. Sharing any of our content and episodes with Jesse, with your friends and family, anybody that you think could benefit from listening to the show is always greatly appreciated. We always love hearing your feedback. You can reach out to me at askwhatnowpodcast@gmail.com. And all of my social media will also be in the show notes as well. And just remember, wanderers are always welcome.